Don't come back home until you apologize to your sister, my mother shouted in front of the whole family on Christmas Day. Then she threw me out. My aunts, uncles, and cousins laughed, whispering about how jealous and bitter I was. My face burned, but I didn't scream or beg. I just looked at my mother, said fine, put on my coat, and walked out into the freezing Illinois snow with exactly $400 to my name. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 3 years secretly keeping a roof over their heads. And what my mother couldn't possibly anticipate was that kicking me out triggered a legal avalanche. The next morning, our family lawyer burst through her front door, pale and trembling, and asked her, "Ma'am, what have you done?" Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now let me take you back to that Christmas dinner in the suburbs of Chicago, the night my family decided I was their favorite scapegoat. The dining room table was set with the good silver, the crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier. We were 20 minutes into dinner when my older sister Clara decided it was time for her performance. Clara was 31, a boutique owner, and the undisputed golden child of the Jenkins family. She was charismatic, always dressed in designer labels and constantly needing to be rescued. I was the invisible workhorse, a forensic accountant who paid her bills and kept my head down. Clara stood up, her eyes already welling with tears. She took a deep, shuddering breath that silenced the room. "I can't hide it anymore," she announced, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. "My boutique is facing bankruptcy." Gasps around the table. My mother Brenda immediately reached for Clara's hand. "Oh, honey, why didn't you tell us?" Brenda asked, her voice thick with panic. Clara looked directly at me. "I couldn't," she whispered, "because Morgan took the seed money you gave me. She embezzled it from the business account." The silence in the room was absolute. Clara slid a folder across the table. It was filled with bank statements, routing numbers highlighted in yellow. "Look for yourselves," she sobbed. The transfers went straight into an account with Morgan's name on it. Aunt Carol covered her mouth. Uncle Greg shook his head in disgust. My mother didn't even look at the papers. She didn't ask for my side of the story. She turned to me, her face pale with fury. "How could you?" she hissed. "Your own sister." I looked at the folder. I knew exactly what those statements were. They weren't embezzlement. They were wire transfers from my personal savings, keeping Clara's failing boutique out of tax foreclosure for the last 8 months. I had structured the payments to look like business capital, so Clara wouldn't have to face the humiliation of failing in front of the family. I had emptied my own accounts to save her pride, and now she was using those exact transfers to frame me. "Mom," I started, keeping my voice level, "if you actually look at the routing numbers—" "Don't you dare lie to me," Brenda screamed, slamming her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "You've always been jealous of Clara. Always. But stealing from her, trying to ruin her life?" Clara buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She was executing a flawless routine, and everyone was buying it. "I'm not jealous," I said quietly, "and I didn't steal anything. I paid her back taxes." "Liar," Aunt Carol muttered loud enough for the whole table to hear. My mother stood up, pointing a trembling finger at the front door. "Get out! Mom, please think about what you're doing." I said, "Get out. Don't come back home until you apologize to your sister and hand over every cent you stole. And consider yourself removed from this family until you do." The room was staring at me. They were waiting for me to break, to cry, to beg for forgiveness for a crime I didn't commit. But something inside me, some final thread of loyalty I had been holding on to for years, just snapped. The anger didn't explode. It went cold. Fine. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked to the closet. I put on my winter coat. No one stopped me. No one asked a single question. I opened the front door, the icy wind biting my face, and stepped out into the night. I drove back to my small apartment in the city in complete silence. My phone didn't ring once. No texts asking if I made it home safe. No demands for the truth. Just the crushing weight of knowing that the people I had quietly sacrificed everything for had just gleefully thrown me to the wolves. But as I sat on my couch with $400 in my checking account, I realized one crucial detail that Clara, in her panic to find a scapegoat, had overlooked. By forcing my mother to formally kick me out and declare me removed from the family, Clara hadn't just ruined my Christmas. She had just detonated a financial bomb that was going to level their entire reality by sunrise. The drive down Interstate 90 takes 45 minutes. The heater in my Honda Civic gave out 2 winters ago. The snow hits the windshield in heavy wet sheets, but I do not turn on the radio. I just listen to the rhythm of the wiper blades and let the cold air keep me awake. People think betrayal is loud. They think it sounds like shouting and slamming doors. But the real betrayal is quiet. It is the silence in the car after you realize the people you bled for just served you on a silver platter. To understand why Clara's lie was not just cruel but surgical, you need to understand what happened 3 years ago. When my father died of a sudden heart attack, everyone in our affluent Chicago suburb mourned the loss of a financial visionary. My father wore imported Italian suits and drove a leased German sedan. He projected wealth with flawless execution. But grief has a funny way of stripping the paint off the walls. 3 days after the funeral, my mother Clara and I sat in the polished oak office of Mr. Gable, the family estate attorney. Brenda was weeping delicately into a tissue. Clara was staring at her phone. Mr. Gable handed me a ledger. He did not hand it to my mother. He handed it to me because he knew I was the only one in the room who could read a balance sheet without fainting. The estate was underwater. Deeply, irreparably underwater. My father had leveraged the family home twice over to cover a string of catastrophic day trading losses. The debt was staggering. The bank was preparing to foreclose on the property within 60 days. My mother would lose the house, her country club membership, and her entire social identity. Clara would lose her limitless credit cards. I looked at my mother. She was helpless. I looked at Clara. She was oblivious. I made a choice right then, sitting in that leather chair. I chose to be the shield. I used my credentials as a forensic accountant to restructure the debt. I negotiated a complex forbearance agreement with the bank. The terms were brutal. The bank agreed to halt the foreclosure and convert the debt into a manageable line of credit, but they required a solvent guarantor. My mother did not qualify. Clara certainly did not qualify. I tied my own name, my own pristine credit score, and my own income to the family estate. I became the sole underwriter. For 3 years, I worked my day job at a corporate firm and took on a second gig, doing late-night tax preparation for freelance contractors. I slept 4 hours a night. I skipped vacations. I ate dollar store pasta so my mother could keep hosting her monthly wine tastings without the neighborhood finding out she was secretly bankrupt. I never told Clara. I thought I was protecting her. That was my single biggest mistake. Clara operated under the delusion that the Jenkins family wealth was an endless magical well. When she decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur, she opened a high-end clothing boutique downtown. She spent $70,000 on velvet dressing rooms, a custom neon sign with her signature, and a lavish launch party. She spent $0 on inventory management. Within 6 months, the boutique was bleeding cash. Vendors were threatening lawsuits. The landlord posted a late notice on her glass door. This is where the psychology of the golden child becomes dangerous. Clara could not simply admit she failed. In her mind, she was brilliant. She was destined for success. If she was failing, it had to be someone else's fault. A golden child cannot process personal responsibility. Their ego is too fragile. They do not just need a cover story to hide their mistakes, they need a villain. I was the perfect target. I was quiet. I managed the money. I kept my head down. Clara knew I had been wiring funds into her business account. She knew I was doing it to save her from tax foreclosure. But she took those bank statements, printed them out, and spun the narrative in reverse. She stood in front of the entire family and turned my silent rescue mission into a calculated embezzlement scheme. She needed to destroy my reputation to protect her own pride. And my mother, who valued Clara's performance over my quiet loyalty, bought the lie without a second thought. I park my car on the street outside my apartment building in the city. The streetlights flicker. I walk up 3 flights of stairs. My studio apartment is small. The pipes rattle when the neighbor turns on the shower. I unlock the door and drop my keys on the counter. I do not turn on the lights right away. I just sit on my hand-me-down couch in the dark. I pull my phone out of my pocket. The screen glows. 0 missed calls, 0 text messages. Not from my mother, not from my aunts, not from Clara. I open my banking app. Available balance $412. Every other cent I earned this year is currently locked up in a trust account keeping the heat on in Brenda's house. Let me pause the story right here for a second. If you have ever been the person carrying the weight for a family that refuses to carry you, drop a resilient in the comments. Have you ever covered for a sibling who threw you under the bus the second it benefited them? Let me know because I read every single comment. I sit on that couch for an hour. I feel the cold seeping through the window panes. I am not crying. I am angry, yes, but it is a sharp, productive anger. I realize the people I secretly sacrificed my youth to protect have just gleefully handed me a life sentence of family exile. They think they won. They think they cast out the bitter, jealous sister. But Clara is not a forensic accountant, and Brenda has not looked at a legal document in 3 years. When Brenda stood at the head of the dining room table and screamed for me to get out, she felt powerful. When she declared me removed from the family until I returned her stolen money, she felt righteous. She thought she was establishing a moral boundary. She did not realize she was triggering a tripwire. The forbearance agreement I structured with the bank was legally precarious. It hinged on a very specific set of clauses regarding owner occupancy and trustee residency. To keep the favorable interest rate and prevent the bank from seizing the property, the guarantor had to maintain legal standing as a resident and an active member of the family trust. My mother just verbally and explicitly severed that standing in front of 12 witnesses. By forcing me off the property and demanding I surrender my ties to the family, she unknowingly nullified the only contract keeping a roof over her head. Tomorrow is December 26th. The holiday weekend is over. The automated banking systems update at 9 in the morning. When the local branch processes the sudden change in my legal residency status, the default clause will activate. The forbearance agreement will instantly evaporate. I look at the clock on my stove. It is 2 in the morning. 7 hours from now, Mr. Gable is going to receive an automated legal notice from the lender. He is going to open his laptop, read the terms of the default, and realize that my mother just kicked out the only person preventing a $2.5 million foreclosure. I plug my phone into the charger. I set my alarm for 7 in the morning. For the first time in 3 years, I am going to sleep soundly. The morning of December 26th arrives in the Chicago suburbs with a bitter wind that rattles the storm windows of the Jenkins estate. Inside the kitchen, the climate is perfectly controlled. Brenda stands at the center island. Her fingers trace the edge of a bone china coffee cup. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a perceived victory. Brenda feels a profound sense of order. In her mind, she is a custodian of family standards. She replays the events of Christmas dinner, refining the narrative she will present to her friends at the country club. She will say she had to make a heartbreaking decision. She will say, Morgan lost her way. Brenda thrives on this type of tragic martyrdom. It elevates her. It makes her the strong matriarch who protected her vulnerable, successful older daughter from a jealous sibling. She pours a second cup of dark roast. She plans to spend the afternoon calling contractors to remodel my old bedroom. She wants to turn it into a Pilates studio for Clara. Through the arched windows of the kitchen, movement catches her eye. A silver SUV rounds the circular driveway, taking the curve too fast. The tires slip on the black ice, throwing a spray of gray slush across the manicured lawn. The vehicle jerks to a halt near the front portico. Brenda frowns. She sets her cup down. The man stepping out of the driver's side door is Arthur Gable. He has been the family estate attorney for 2 decades. Arthur is a man defined by precision. He schedules his phone calls down to the minute. He wears bespoke wool suits and never speaks above a measured conversational volume. Today, Arthur is falling apart. He is not wearing an overcoat despite the freezing wind. His suit jacket is unbuttoned. He carries a thick leather binder pressed tightly against his chest. He does not ring the doorbell. He pushes the heavy oak front door open, stepping into the grand foyer with his boots still covered in wet snow. Brenda walks out of the kitchen, her expression tightening with disapproval. Arthur, it is a holiday weekend. Whatever documents you need reviewed can wait until Monday morning. Arthur does not greet her. He walks directly past her, his breathing heavy, and heads straight for the kitchen. He drops the leather binder onto the center island. The sound is a sharp thud that echoes off the high ceilings. Mom, what have you done? His voice is hollow. It is not an accusation. It is the sound of a man standing on the edge of a crater. Brenda crosses her arms, pulling her cashmere robe tighter around her waist. I handled a domestic issue, Arthur. I removed a thief from my home. Morgan embezzled money from Clara's business. I drew a boundary. I told her to pack her things, and I formally removed her from this household. Arthur stares at her. His eyes are bloodshot. He places both hands flat on the marble counter, leaning his weight onto his wrists. You formally removed her. You told her she is no longer a resident of this estate. Yes, Brenda says, her chin lifting. I did what a mother has to do to protect her family. Arthur lets out a breath that sounds like scraping metal. He flips the heavy cover of the binder open. Stacks of paper highlighted in harsh yellow ink spill across the pristine counter. He stabs a finger at the top page. Look at these papers, Brenda. Read the print. These are not embezzlement records. Morgan did not steal a single cent from Clara. Brenda shakes her head, waving a dismissive hand. Clara showed us the bank statements last night. We all saw them. The money went into an account with Morgan's name on it. Because Morgan is the guarantor, Arthur says. His voice breaks the polished silence of the room. Because Morgan is the only reason you are standing in a kitchen instead of a homeless shelter. Brenda stops moving. The hum of the refrigerator is the only sound in the house. She looks at the lawyer. Guarantor. Guarantor for what? For the $2.5 million commercial line of credit, keeping this property out of foreclosure, Arthur says. He pulls a specific ledger from the binder and slides it toward her. 3 years ago, your husband died, leaving this estate bankrupt. He had leveraged the equity twice over to cover market losses. The bank was 60 days away from seizing this house. You had zero income. You had zero credit. The lending institution required a solvent, legally bound underwriter to restructure that debt into a forbearance agreement. Morgan stepped in. She tied her own pristine financial record to your mortgage. She took on a second job to cover the interest payments. She has been quietly funding your illusion of wealth for 36 months. Brenda looks at the ledger. She sees my signature at the bottom of the page. She takes a slow step back. No, that is not right. Clara said the money Morgan transferred was stolen from her boutique. Arthur pulls another document from the stack. The header bears the official seal of the Illinois Department of Revenue. He pushes it across the marble. These are the actual wire transfer logs from yesterday morning. Yes, Morgan transferred funds out of her personal accounts, but they did not go into a slush fund. Morgan wired $32,000 directly to the state tax board. Clara has not paid state taxes for her business in 4 quarters. The state was 48 hours away from seizing Clara's limited liability company. Morgan emptied her own savings account to save your other daughter from felony tax evasion charges. Brenda stares at the state seal. The routing numbers match the ones Clara displayed at the dinner table. The payee is not Morgan. The payee is the government. Footsteps echo on the hardwood floor of the hallway. Clara walks into the kitchen. She is wearing silk pajamas, holding a glass of water. She stops near the archway when she sees the papers scattered across the island and the estate lawyer gripping the counter. What is going on? Clara asks. Her voice carries a thin edge of nervous energy. Arthur turns his head. He looks at Clara with a level of disgust that strips away any professional courtesy. You forged financial documents. You altered the payee lines on Morgan's wire transfers and presented them to your family as evidence of theft. In the state of Illinois, that constitutes criminal fraud. Clara freezes. The glass of water slips from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Water pools around the shards. She opens her mouth to speak, to pivot, to play the victim, but the words fail her. The performance requires an audience that believes her, and she realizes in real time that her audience is looking at the state tax receipts. Arthur turns his attention back to Brenda. He taps his finger against the final document in the binder. It is a letter from the lending institution printed on heavy stock paper. The forbearance agreement had one ironclad stipulation, Arthur explains. The guarantor had to maintain legal residency and trustee status within the household. It is a standard risk mitigation clause. The bank needed Morgan legally tethered to the physical asset. Last night, you explicitly and verbally severed that tether in front of multiple witnesses. You evicted the sole guarantor. Brenda feels the blood leave her face. What does that mean? It means you tripped the default wire, Arthur says. The bank system's updated at 7 this morning. When the change in Morgan's residency status processed, the forbearance agreement was instantly voided. The bank is calling in the loan. They want the $2.5 million. When Brenda asks, her voice is barely a whisper. She sinks onto a bar stool. By the end of the week, Arthur replies, Friday at 5 in the afternoon. If the balance is not settled, they execute the deed in lieu of foreclosure. You will have 30 days to vacate the premises. The estate will be seized. The accounts will be frozen. You will have nothing. Clara grips the doorframe. Mom, she stammers. Mom, we can fix this. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them Morgan is still here. Arthur looks at Clara. The bank does not care about your family drama. They care about financial risk, and right now their only reliable underwriter is gone. Brenda looks around her kitchen. She looks at the imported Italian tile, the custom cabinetry, the life she thought she owned. The entire architecture of her reality was built on a foundation of quiet sacrifice by the daughter she just threw away. She realizes she traded her actual savior for a daughter who was willing to let the family burn to hide a tax bill. Fix it. Brenda gasps, looking up at the lawyer. File an injunction. Do something. I cannot fix it, Arthur says quietly. He closes the binder. The only person who can stop this foreclosure is the guarantor. Morgan has to contact the bank. She has to formally reverse the eviction, reinstate her trustee status, and sign a new underwriting agreement. And she has to do it before Friday. Brenda lunges for her phone resting near the coffee maker. Her hands shake as she pulls up my contact. She expects what she has always expected. She expects me to answer on the first ring. She expects me to absorb her panic and clean up the mess. She holds the phone to her ear. Arthur watches her. Clara watches her. The kitchen is dead silent, waiting for the sound of my voice. But they do not hear my voice. They do not even hear the phone ringing. They hear the flat, dead sound of a disconnected line. Brenda presses the phone to her ear. She waits for the familiar ringback tone. She expects the electronic trill followed by my voice, tired but compliant, ready to fix the disaster. Instead, she hears 3 harsh, rapid beeps. Then a pre-recorded operator announces that the number you have reached is no longer in service. Brenda pulls the device away from her face. She stares at the glowing screen. She taps redial. The same 3 harsh beeps fill the kitchen. The sound bounces off the marble countertops and the custom cabinets. It is the sound of a bridge collapsing. Arthur watches her. Clara watches her. Brenda dials a 3rd time. Her manicured thumbnail taps the glass screen with frantic precision. 3 beeps. Disconnected. She is gone, Arthur states. His voice carries no sympathy. It holds only the clinical delivery of a terminal diagnosis. 30 miles away, I am standing at the counter of a cellular retail store in downtown Chicago. The morning commute rushes past the frosted glass windows. The elevated train roars overhead, rattling the display cases. It is a harsh mechanical noise, a sharp contrast to the silent, suffocating tension of the suburbs. I hand the clerk $50 in cash. I tell him I need a prepaid card and a brand new phone number. I instruct him to take my old chip and snap it in half. He hesitates, his eyes flicking from the cash to my face, perhaps sensing the gravity of the request. People do not destroy their digital lives on a whim. But he takes the money, breaks the small plastic square with a crisp snap, and slides the new hardware across the glass counter. In that tiny physical break, my past ceases to exist. My mother can dial until her fingers bleed. I am unreachable. I walk back to my studio apartment. The winter air bites at my exposed neck. The slush on the sidewalk soaks into the seams of my boots. I ignore the discomfort. My mind is operating in a state of hyper-focused triage. When you spend your entire life managing crises for other people, you learn to compartmentalize panic. You put it in a box, lock the lid, and deal with the logistics of survival. I have exactly $412 in my checking account. I know this number intimately. I do not have a robust savings safety net, because every time I managed to build one, the estate required a new roof, or the property taxes spiked, or Clara needed a bridge loan to keep up appearances. I drained my own retirement fund last spring to cover a plumbing emergency at the main house. I sacrificed my future to maintain their present. I thought my competence would eventually earn their respect. I thought if I just solved enough problems, if I just prevented enough disasters, Brenda would look at me the way she looked at Clara. I thought my utility would translate into love. But utility is just another word for exploitation. When a tool breaks, or when a tool speaks up, you discard it. Last night I spoke up, and I was discarded. I pull 2 cardboard boxes from the recycling bin in the alley behind my building. I carry them up the 3 flights of stairs. The apartment is barely 400 square feet. The radiator hisses in the corner, providing a meager, inconsistent warmth. I do not own much. When you live in perpetual servitude to someone else's lifestyle, you forget to accumulate things for yourself. My wardrobe consists of practical slacks, neutral blouses, and a heavy winter coat. I own 2 coffee mugs. I own a decent laptop. I pack my clothes into a duffel bag and put my books into the cardboard boxes. The entire process takes less than 45 minutes. That is all it takes to erase my physical presence from this space. I sit cross-legged on the bare hardwood floor. Dust motes float in the pale morning light filtering through the single window. I open my banking application one last time. $412. Rent is due in 5 days. I have no job lined up yet. I have no emergency contacts to call. If I fall, I will hit the concrete. There is a very specific type of fear that comes with choosing yourself after a lifetime of being conditioned to serve. It feels like stepping off a ledge in the dark. I could go to a payphone right now. I could call Arthur. I could drive back to the suburbs, walk into that kitchen, and sign whatever documents they need to stop the foreclosure. If I did that, Brenda would cry and hug me. She would tell me she forgives me. She would rewrite history, making herself the benevolent mother, welcoming the prodigal daughter home. I would get my old bedroom back. I would get a seat at the dining room table, and I would remain their prisoner until the day I died. I realized then that the small balance in my account is not a sign of poverty. It is the cost of admission to my own life. It is the cheapest ransom I could ever pay to buy back my freedom. I am not crying. The tears dried up somewhere on the highway last night. What replaces the sorrow is a cold, mechanical clarity. I boot up my laptop. The battery shows 40%. I connect to the unstable building internet. I open a blank email draft. I type the official firm address for Arthur into the recipient line. I do not copy Brenda. I do not copy Clara. They do not get the courtesy of direct communication anymore. My fingers hover over the keyboard. I am a forensic accountant. I build my life around ledgers, audits, and balanced sheets. I know the exact legal weight of the words I am about to write. I know that this email will be printed out, placed in a manila folder, and presented to a bank executive who will stamp it with red ink. I know this email is the final nail in the coffin of the Jenkins estate. The subject line is simple: Notice of resignation and severance of guarantor status. I keep the body of the text brief. Emotion has no place in legal correspondence. I state my full name. I state the exact account numbers of the commercial line of credit. I write effective immediately I formally resign as the financial guarantor for the Jenkins family estate. I am formally relinquishing my trustee status per the explicit witness demands of the primary resident recorded on December 25th. I will not sign any renewal documents. I will not answer any inquiries regarding this property. Any further attempts to contact me will be considered harassment and referred to legal counsel. I read the words twice. They are sterile. They are final. I move the cursor over the send button. For a fraction of a second, the image of my childhood home flashes in my mind. The crown molding the grand staircase, the manicured lawn where my father used to host summer barbecues. The bank will take it all. They will lock the doors and auction the furniture. Brenda will have to pack her designer shoes into trash bags. Clara will have to find a real job. The empire of lies will burn to the ground. I press send. The progress bar shoots across the bottom of the screen. Message sent. The electronic chime sounds incredibly loud in the empty apartment. I close the laptop. I slip it into my backpack. I stand up and brush the dust from my slacks. I shoulder the backpack and pick up the duffel bag. I lock the apartment door behind me and drop the key into the mail slot. I do not look back. I walk down the stairs and push the lobby door open, stepping out into the brutal Chicago winter. The wind coming off Lake Michigan cuts through my coat, but I stand tall. I take a deep breath of the freezing air. It burns my lungs and it feels like breathing for the very first time. I need to stop the story right here for a moment. I need you to think about what you just heard. If you were standing in my shoes with $400 to your name and a lifetime of emotional debt tying you down, what would you do? Would you pick up the phone, call the lawyer, and save your mother from living on the street? Or would you send that email, close your laptop, and let the house burn to the ground? Drop your honest answer in the comments right now. Type save them or type let it burn. I really want to see how many of you would have the strength to walk away. Because walking away was just the first step. The real challenge was figuring out how to rebuild an entire life from scratch while carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a razor-sharp intellect. What happened next is proof that when you stop carrying everyone else's baggage, you can climb higher than they ever thought possible. The transition from the freezing sidewalk to a new life does not happen in a montage. It happens in slow, agonizing increments. The first week of January, I secure a job doing entry-level data processing for a mid-tier corporate auditing firm in the Loop. My resume screams overqualified, but I have no references I can safely use, and I need a paycheck immediately. The salary is an insult, barely enough to cover the security deposit on a basement apartment in Albany Park. The apartment has no furniture. I sleep on a plastic air mattress that deflates by 3 in the morning. My kitchen consists of a microwave resting on a cardboard box. I eat 90-cent ramen noodles for dinner. The radiator clanks and spits steam, failing to push the cold out of the room, but I do not mind the concrete floor or the freezing drafts. The silence in that basement is mine. I bought it. It is the most expensive thing I have ever owned. I throw myself into the job. I take the shifts the senior analysts avoid. I work 80-hour weeks. I reconcile mundane corporate expense accounts, verify supply chain invoices, and cross-reference depreciation schedules. The work is designed to be tedious, a test of endurance for junior clerks. But I do not approach it like a clerk. I approach it with the same surgical precision I used to keep the Jenkins estate breathing. The firm is dominated by Vivian Caldwell. She is 55 years old, a senior partner, and the undisputed apex predator of the forensic division. She wears immaculate tailored suits and keeps her silver hair cut in a severe bob. The junior staff calls her the Iron Maiden. Vivian does not manage people, she manages results. She is known for firing associates over a misplaced decimal point during a preliminary review. She operates on a strict, unforgiving meritocracy. I stay off her radar for the first 6 weeks. I keep my head down and my output flawless. Then, a Tuesday in late February changes the trajectory of my life. The office is deserted. It is 1 in the afternoon and everyone has left for a catered networking lunch. I stay behind at my cubicle eating a stale sandwich, reviewing a digital ledger for a regional logistics company. I was instructed to simply format the spreadsheets for the quarterly report. But the numbers snag my attention. There is a rhythm to clean money. It flows with logical consistency. The numbers on my screen have a stutter. I stop formatting and start pulling historical data. I trace a pattern of recurring vendor payouts categorized under generic maintenance fees. The routing numbers bounce through 3 different regional banks before disappearing. I pull up the public incorporation records for the vendors. They share the same registered agent in Delaware. I need space to map the network. I take my laptop into an empty glass-walled conference room. I grab a dry erase marker and start diagramming the transactions on the whiteboard. I write out the corporate structures connecting the dummy invoices to the inflated overhead costs. I am tracking a sophisticated asset tracing scheme. The logistics company is bleeding capital into offshore shell corporations to artificially lower their domestic tax burden. It is textbook tax evasion layered beneath a dozen corporate veils. I am so focused on mapping the flow of the illicit capital that I do not hear the conference room door open. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" The voice is sharp, cutting through the quiet room like a scalpel. I turn around. Vivian Caldwell is standing in the doorway. Her eyes flick from my face to the whiteboard, taking in the web of arrows routing numbers and corporate entities. I do not apologize. I do not scramble to erase the board. I learned a long time ago that shrinking yourself only invites predators to strike. I cap the marker and look her in the eye. "I am mapping a tax evasion structure hidden within the logistics account," I say, my voice steady. "The client is using a network of shell corporations disguised as independent contractors to siphon taxable revenue offshore." Vivian steps into the room. She does not look at me. She walks up to the whiteboard and studies the diagram. The silence stretches. She traces the line from a domestic holding company to a Delaware LLC with her manicured finger. "You are a data entry clerk," Vivian says, her tone unreadable. "You were tasked with formatting cells." "The cells were hiding a felony," I reply. "Formatting a lie makes me an accomplice. I prefer to find the truth." Vivian turns to face me. She evaluates me, stripping away my cheap suit and my tired eyes. She asks me a highly technical question about capital gains deferment within the Delaware loophole. I answer it without hesitation, citing the specific tax code. She counters with a scenario involving depreciating asset transfers. I dismantle her scenario using the routing data I just uncovered. We stand in that conference room for 20 minutes, trading forensic accounting theories like punches. She tests the limits of my intellect, pushing to see where my logic fractures. It never fractures. Surviving in my childhood home required anticipating threats before they materialized. I spent my formative years analyzing the shifting moods and lies of my family. Corporate fraud is simple by comparison. Numbers do not throw tantrums. Numbers do not play the victim. Vivian crosses her arms. She recognizes the edge in my voice. She sees a brilliant trauma-forged mind that operates best under pressure. "Pack up your cubicle," she says. I hold my ground. "Am I fired?" "You are promoted," she replies, walking toward the door. "You start on my direct team tomorrow morning at 6. Do not be late." That moment is the catalyst. Vivian becomes the mentor I never had. The dynamic between us is grueling. She hands me impossible portfolios. She demands a level of excellence that breaks most junior associates within a month. But the contrast between Vivian and my mother is profound. Brenda demanded blind obedience to feed her own fragile ego. Brenda wanted me small, quiet, and useful. Vivian demands perfection to build my competence. She does not care about my tone. She cares about my accuracy. When I deliver a flawless audit, she does not offer empty praise. She offers harder work and higher compensation. Under her guidance, my ascent is terrifyingly fast. I learn how to dismantle complex embezzlement rings. I learn how to interview hostile executives without letting them see my strategy. I learn how to follow the money through the darkest corners of the financial system. 3 years pass. The time compresses as it always does when you are building a new reality. I do not look back. I never search for my family on the internet. I do not care if they lost the house or if they kept it. The rage burns out, leaving behind a cold structural peace. My bank account grows from $400 to a significant 6-figure balance. I throw out the deflating air mattress. I move into a renovated brownstone apartment with exposed brick walls and a view of the skyline. I buy furniture I actually like. I build a life that belongs entirely to me. The corporate auditing firm eventually becomes too bureaucratic for Vivian. She hates the red tape and the internal politics, so at the age of 58, the Iron Maiden resigns. She launches her own boutique forensic accounting firm catering exclusively to high-net-worth clients and complex corporate disputes. She takes her most lucrative accounts with her, and she takes me. I am no longer a clerk. I am no longer an analyst. Vivian offers me a junior partnership. My name goes on the glass door of our new high-rise office overlooking the Chicago River. I am 31 years old, and I have engineered an untouchable existence. I have a career built on unearthing the truth. But a fortress built on truth often acts as a magnet for people addicted to lies. While I am securing my legacy in the city, someone else is spinning a desperate web in the suburbs. The geography of financial ruin is a very small world, and the past has a funny way of showing up on your balance sheet when you least expect it. The consequences of December 26th did not arrive all at once. They arrived in a slow, degrading procession of certified letters and moving boxes. The bank executed the deed in lieu of foreclosure precisely as Arthur Gable predicted. Brenda tried to negotiate. She tried to leverage her social standing. She quickly learned that country club memberships do not pay mortgages. They lost the estate. The custom cabinetry, the crystal chandeliers, the manicured lawn, all of it was liquidated. Brenda and Clara now live in a 2-bedroom condominium in a much less prestigious zip code. The condo smells faintly of old carpet and desperation. The walls are thin enough that Brenda can hear the neighbors arguing. For a woman whose entire identity was anchored to a specific square footage and a premium address, the demotion is a daily, suffocating humiliation. But humiliation does not automatically breed self-awareness. Instead of adapting, Clara's entitlement mutated. She could have taken a legitimate job. She could have used her degree. But legitimate work requires accountability, and Clara views accountability as a personal insult. She clings to the illusion of being an entrepreneur, rebranding herself on social media as a lifestyle influencer. She posts curated photos of expensive lattes and designer handbags she can no longer afford. The internet is a convenient stage for someone addicted to performance. To fund this facade, Clara found a position as an independent accounts payable contractor for Vanguard Commercial Realty. Vanguard is a mid-sized regional firm that manages strip malls and small office parks across the Midwest. They hired Clara because she interviewed well. She wore a tailored suit, smiled at the right moments, and projected an aura of effortless competence. They did not perform a deep background check. They simply handed her the keys to their vendor payment portal. Clara's job is straightforward. She processes invoices from landscapers, maintenance crews, and security companies. She authorizes the digital payouts and balances the monthly ledgers. It is a position built on trust. Trust is a vulnerability Clara knows exactly how to exploit. The skimming starts small, a few $100s here, 1,000 there. Clara justifies it the same way she justified everything else in her life. She convinces herself she is underpaid. She tells herself she is just taking what she deserves to maintain her standard of living. Old habits die hard, especially when the person practicing them has never faced a genuine consequence. Her method is remarkably simple. It lacks the sophisticated layering of the corporate evasion structures I dismantle every day. Clara creates dummy invoices for services that were never rendered. She bills Vanguard for non-existent snow removal at vacant properties. She charges them for roof repairs on buildings that were demolished 2 years ago. She needs a destination for the stolen capital, so she registers a limited liability company in Illinois. She names it Apex Consulting Solutions. It is a shell company, a hollow entity that exists solely on paper. She opens a commercial checking account under the Apex name. Every Friday when Vanguard authorizes the weekly vendor payouts, Clara routes a percentage of the capital directly into the Apex account. She uses the stolen money to lease a luxury SUV she parks 3 blocks away from the cramped condo, so Brenda will not ask questions. She uses it to buy the designer clothes she flaunts on her social media channels. She uses it to maintain the lie. Clara is sloppy. She uses her personal email address to register the LLC domain. She uses the condo's physical address on the incorporation documents. She does not vary the invoice amounts, billing exactly $4,200 every 2 weeks for generic maintenance. She leaves a digital footprint wide enough to be seen from space. But arrogance is a powerful blindfold. Clara assumes she will never be caught because she has spent 31 years getting away with murder. Whenever a discrepancy arises, Clara blames the internal accounting software. Whenever a vendor complains about a delayed payment, Clara points a finger at a fictional clerical error. She is playing the exact same game she played at our dining room table. She is relying on the assumption that people are too polite or too busy to demand the underlying receipts. She sits at the small laminate dining table in the condo, tapping away on her laptop, sipping a generic brand of sparkling water. Brenda sits across from her watching daytime television, completely oblivious to the fact that her favorite daughter is committing felony wire fraud in their living room. Clara hits execute on a transfer of $7,000. The progress bar fills. The screen flashes green. Transfer successful. She smiles, closing the laptop. She thinks she has mastered the system. She thinks she has finally found a way to win without my invisible safety net. She has no idea that the system she is exploiting is a closed loop. She has no idea that the financial world is incredibly small and that the corporate entity she is robbing is about to order a comprehensive audit. Most importantly, Clara does not know who Vanguard Commercial Realty retains when they suspect internal hemorrhaging. She is building a house of cards directly in the path of a hurricane, completely unaware of the storm brewing 30 miles away, in a high-rise office in Chicago. Time is a brilliant architect. It takes the wreckage of a collapsed life, and if you let it build something impenetrable in its place. 4 years have passed since the night I walked out into the freezing snow with $400. I am 32 years old. The basement apartment in Albany Park is a distant memory. I wake up on a Tuesday morning in a renovated brownstone in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The early light filters through tall windows, casting long shadows across the exposed brick walls and the wide plank oak floors. The space is quiet, intentional, and entirely mine. Actually, it is ours. Julian stands at the kitchen counter pouring coffee into 2 ceramic mugs. He wears a pressed white shirt, his tie draped loosely over the back of a dining chair. Julian is a state prosecutor for Cook County. We met 2 years ago during a complex securities fraud trial. Vivian Caldwell had contracted our firm to provide expert forensic testimony, and I was the lead auditor on the stand. Julian was the attorney tearing the defense apart. He cross-examined me for 3 hours. He tested my methodology, probing for weaknesses in my asset tracing. I gave him nothing but ironclad mathematics. Most men in his position are intimidated by a witness who refuses to yield ground. Julian was captivated. He asked me to dinner the day after he secured the conviction. Julian is a man built on facts. He operates in a world of hard evidence and statutory law. When we started dating, I did not hide my past. I laid out the history of the Jenkins family with the same clinical detachment I use for a corporate ledger. I told him about the forbearance agreement, the doctored wire transfers, and the Christmas dinner execution. Julian did not offer useless pity. He did not suggest therapy or reconciliation. He looked at me, processed the data, and said, "They do not get to sit at your table ever again." He protects my peace with the same razor-sharp intensity he uses to lock up corrupt politicians. I take the mug he offers. We drink our coffee in a comfortable silence. Let me address something crucial about human nature and the concept of revenge. Society conditions us to expect a cinematic retaliation. People think healing requires a dramatic showdown, a moment where you stand over the people who wronged you and force them to apologize. But reality operates differently. Rage is an incredibly expensive emotion. It requires constant fuel. It demands your time, your focus, and your energy. For the first year after the eviction, I was angry. I used that anger to survive the 80-hour work weeks and the 90-cent dinners. But eventually you reach a point where your new life becomes far more interesting than your old trauma. The rage burns out. What replaces it is a steady, powerful quiet. I do not check Brenda's social media. I do not search for Clara's name on the internet. I do not know what zip code they live in, and I do not care. My ultimate revenge was not ruining them. My ultimate revenge was rendering them entirely irrelevant. I built a life so full, so intellectually stimulating, and so secure that their opinions no longer fit anywhere inside it. They are ghosts haunting a past I no longer inhabit. Julian kisses my forehead, grabs his briefcase, and leaves for the courthouse. I finish my coffee, put on a tailored navy suit, and call a car to take me to the financial district. The offices of Caldwell and Associates occupy the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. When the elevator doors open, the environment is immediate and calibrated. The reception area features slate floors and frosted glass partitions. There is no chaotic shouting, no frantic energy. It is the quiet hum of highly paid professionals dismantling financial deception. I am a junior partner now. My office has a corner view, a mahogany desk, and a door that stays open. I spend the morning leading a team of 5 auditors through a preliminary discovery phase for a manufacturing client. We are prepping for the third quarter, which Vivian has explicitly stated will be the most lucrative in the history of our firm. The stakes are high. I stand behind the chair of a young analyst named Marcus. He is 24, straight out of a top-tier accounting program, and currently staring at a spreadsheet with a look of mounting panic. "Talk to me, Marcus," I say, keeping my voice even. "The supply chain expenditures for their overseas logistics do not reconcile with the customs declarations." He replies, rubbing the back of his neck. "There is a variance of roughly $200,000. I have run the formula 3 times. I think I broke the sheet." "You did not break the sheet," I tell him. "You are looking at the wrong variable. Do not trust the summary columns. Pull the raw invoices from the freight forwarders. Compare the listed cargo weights against the fuel surcharges." Marcus hesitates, then accesses the raw data. He filters the columns. His eyes widen. The fuel surcharges are billed for capacities that exceed the stated cargo weights by 30%. "They are shipping ghost cargo," I confirm. "Flag the accounts. Cross-reference the freight forwarder ownership with the manufacturing board of directors. You will find a hidden subsidiary." Marcus looks up at me with a mixture of relief and awe. I pat his shoulder and walk back to my office. I do not mentor through fear. I mentor through rigorous structural guidance. I know what it feels like to drown in numbers without a lifeline. I refuse to cultivate an environment of anxiety. My trauma no longer defines my management style. My competence does. I am untouchable in this building. At 2 in the afternoon, my desk phone rings. It is Vivian's private extension. "My office," she says. 2 words. Click. Vivian's office is at the far end of the corridor. It is austere, decorated only with modern art and bound volumes of tax law. She is sitting behind her desk wearing a gray silk blouse, reviewing a digital dossier. "Shut the door, Morgan." I close the heavy glass door and take a seat in one of the leather guest chairs. Vivian does not look up immediately. She finishes reading a paragraph, taps her stylus against the screen, and then meets my eyes. "We just secured the retainer for the largest regional audit this firm has ever handled," Vivian says. "The client is a mid-sized commercial real estate conglomerate based out of the suburbs. They manage properties across the Midwest, strip malls, office parks, industrial complexes." I nod. "Real estate conglomerates are our specialty. What is the scope?" "Internal hemorrhaging," Vivian replies, leaning back in her chair. "The chief financial officer contacted me this morning. Their quarterly projections have been missing the mark for 8 months. At first they blamed inflation and market cooling. But last week their internal accounting software flagged a series of statistical anomalies in their vendor payout sector." Vendor payouts, I repeat. That usually means dummy invoices. Someone is skimming. "Exactly," Vivian says. "But the CFO suspects the rot goes deep. They think they have a coordinated embezzlement ring operating within their accounts payable department. They want a full forensic sweep. Every contract, every invoice, every wire transfer from the last 24 months. They want us to map the network, identify the leak, and build a bulletproof evidentiary file they can hand directly to the district attorney. It is a significant undertaking. It will require pulling senior staff off other accounts. It will mean late nights and meticulous, grueling data extraction. It is exactly the kind of puzzle I thrive on. I will need Marcus and 2 other senior analysts, I say, already calculating the logistics in my head. We will start by isolating the recurring maintenance fees and cross-referencing the vendor incorporation dates. Vivian smiles. It is a rare predatory expression. I knew you would want this one. The contract is signed. The digital ledgers are being securely transferred to our servers as we speak. I stand up, smoothing the front of my suit jacket. I am ready. Send me the file. I walk out of Vivian's office feeling a surge of professional adrenaline. My life is a beautifully constructed fortress of logic and justice. I have spent 4 years leaving the chaos of the Jenkins family behind, insulating myself from the irrational demands of a golden child and an enabling mother. I am secure. I am at the top of my game. I have no possible way of knowing that the digital ledgers currently downloading to my secure server are about to drag the ghosts of my past directly into the center of my flawless empire. I am about to open a door I thought I locked forever. The digital ledgers for Vanguard Commercial Realty arrive on my secure server at 4 in the afternoon. The file is massive, containing 24 months of accounts payable, data vendor contracts, and internal communications. I assemble Marcus and 2 other senior analysts, Sarah and David, in the main conference room. The glass walls offer a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, but my focus is entirely on the numbers projected onto the smartboard. We are hunting a ghost in the machine. Embezzlement at this level is rarely a smash-and-grab operation. It is usually a slow, methodical bleed disguised as routine operational friction. We spend the first 3 days establishing a baseline. We map the normal flow of capital for Vanguard. We analyze their legitimate vendors, tracking the seasonal fluctuations in maintenance costs, landscaping, and security. Once we understand how the money is supposed to move, we start looking for the deviations. On Thursday morning, Sarah flags the first anomaly. "Morgan," she says, pointing to her screen. "I isolated the vendor payouts for the last 4 quarters. There is a recurring maintenance expense that spikes at the end of every month. It is always billed slightly under the $10,000 threshold that requires secondary executive approval." I walk over to her desk, pull the vendor names associated with those specific transactions. Sarah runs the filter. "It is a mix," she replies. "Different company names. Summit Landscaping Precision Roof Repair. Apex Consulting Solutions." "It looks like a fragmented vendor list," David chimes in from across the room. "Maybe they just use a lot of local contractors." "No," I say, staring at the screen. "Look at the routing numbers." David squints at the data. He types a quick command to sort the column. The room goes quiet. The vendor names are different, but 30% of those payments are routing into the same exact commercial checking account, David says, his voice dropping. "Someone is using dummy corporations to funnel capital into a single destination." "Bingo," Marcus says, leaning back in his chair. "We found the bleed. Now we just need to identify the leech." I instruct the team to pull the public incorporation documents for every vendor tied to that specific routing number. In the state of Illinois, limited liability companies must register an agent and a physical address. Criminals often try to obscure this by using registered agent services or post office boxes, but eventually, someone has to sign the paperwork. The team dives back into the databases. The atmosphere in the conference room is electric, the specific thrill of cornering a target. I walk back to my corner office to review the initial findings and draft the preliminary brief for Vivian. An hour later, Marcus knocks on my open door. He is holding a printed document. "We pulled the incorporation records," he says, handing me the paper. "Most of them are dead ends. Shell companies registered in Delaware with offshore holding parents, but one of them slipped up. Apex Consulting Solutions. They registered domestically in Illinois 6 months ago." I take the document from him, and they listed a physical address. "Yes," Marcus says, tapping the paper, "and a registered agent. It looks like an individual, not a corporate proxy." "Good work, Marcus. I will take it from here. Go help Sarah trace the offshore parents for the other entities." Marcus nods and leaves the office, pulling the glass door shut behind him. I sit at my mahogany desk. The afternoon sun reflects off the river below, casting sharp angles of light across the room. I look down at the incorporation document for Apex Consulting Solutions. The registered agent line is filled out in a familiar looping cursive font, the kind of handwriting you see on expensive wedding invitations or curated social media posts. Clara Jenkins. The registered address is a condominium complex in a suburb 30 miles away. I do not gasp. I do not drop the paper. I do not feel a sudden surge of adrenaline. I feel an absolute chilling stillness, the kind of stillness that precedes a seismic shift. I stare at the name. Clara Jenkins, my older sister, the golden child who convinced my mother I was a thief, the woman who stood in a dining room 4 years ago and presented my desperate wire transfers as evidence of her own victimization. I read the address. It is not the sprawling family estate. It is a multi-unit condo building. The geography of their demotion is mapped out right in front of me in black ink. The dramatic irony of the situation is staggering. Clara is skimming money from Vanguard Commercial Realty to fund her illusion of success. She is playing the exact same game she played with our family finances, assuming the people in charge are too busy or too polite to demand the receipts. She thinks she is outsmarting the system. She has absolutely no idea that Vanguard Commercial Realty just handed the keys to their entire financial architecture to the one person on earth who knows exactly how she lies. I lean back in my leather chair. The glow of the monitor illuminates my face. I am holding the instrument of my sister's destruction in my hands. It is not a weapon of revenge I sought out. It is a weapon she forged herself, packaged neatly in a corporate ledger and delivered directly to my desk by the universe. I pick up my desk phone and dial Vivian's extension. "Vivian," I say when she answers. "Do we have a target?" she asks, her voice crisp. "We have the central node," I reply. "An entity operating under the name Apex Consulting Solutions. They are siphoning roughly $40,000 a month using dummy invoices." "Excellent," Vivian says. "Do we have a name attached to the entity?" "Yes." I pause, letting the weight of the moment settle. The registered agent is Clara Jenkins. There is silence on the line. Vivian is a predator, but she is a predator with a flawless memory for detail. She remembers the history I shared when she hired me. She remembers the names. "Your sister," Vivian asks. The tone of her voice changes, shifting from strictly professional to something far more dangerous. "Yes." "Are you compromised, Morgan? Do you need to step off the account?" "Off?" I look at the signature on the paper. I think about the 80-hour weeks, the basement apartment, the freezing walk to the cellular store. I think about the fact that Clara did not just steal from me, she tried to ruin my reputation to save her own skin. And now she is doing the exact same thing to a corporate client who pays my firm a premium to protect them. "I am not compromised, Vivian. I am uniquely qualified." Vivian lets out a low, satisfied hum. "Good. Build the net. Make it inescapable." I hang up the phone. The hunt is no longer just a forensic exercise. It is a structural reckoning. But as I dig deeper into Clara's digital footprint over the next few days, I realize that the embezzlement is not the worst crime she has committed. Clara is building a house of cards, but she has not left herself exposed. She has built a trapdoor, and the person she positioned directly over that trapdoor is going to change the entire dynamic of the impending collision. 10 minutes after I hang up the phone with Vivian, I print the incorporation records and walk down the glass corridor to her office. I enter without knocking and place the file directly on the center of her desk. I do not sit down. I stand with my hands clasped behind my back. I tell her I need to officially disclose a severe conflict of interest. The target is my immediate family. I offer to hand the execution phase over to a senior partner. I explain that any legal proceeding resulting from this audit requires an unassailable chain of custody. If the defense discovers the lead investigator is the estranged sister of the primary suspect, they will attempt to have the evidence dismissed on the grounds of personal bias. Vivian picks up the document. She reads the name. She traces the address with her luxury pen. She does not look concerned. She looks deeply intrigued. Bias is a factor when the evidence is subjective. Vivian says, her voice cool and level. Numbers are not subjective. You have already mapped the routing structure. You have the network logs. The chain of custody is secure because the data is immutable. I am not taking you off this account. I remind her of the optics. Vivian smiles. It is a tight, calculated expression. The optics do not concern me, she replies. What concerns me is efficiency. You spent your entire childhood studying the psychology of this specific target. You know how she lies. You know where she hides her mistakes. Nobody in this firm is better equipped to dismantle her architecture than you. Finish the job. I return to the war room. The dynamic shifts. We are no longer just looking for missing corporate funds. We are building a digital cage. I instruct Marcus, Sarah, and David to pivot their focus from the corporate ledgers to the personal outflow. We issue subpoenas for the credit card statements and bank records linked to Apex Consulting Solutions. When the financial records arrive on our secure servers, they paint a pathetic picture of desperate vanity. Clara did not steal to survive. She stole to perform. We track the flow of stolen capital directly into the lifestyle she broadcasts on the internet. Sarah highlights a charge for $4,000 at a high-end boutique on Oak Street. David traces a recurring monthly draft of $1,200 for a leased luxury sport utility vehicle. I find airline tickets to coastal resorts, hotel receipts from ski towns and restaurant bills that exceed the weekly grocery budget of an average family. Every single transaction is a federal crime. Every iced coffee she purchased with that debit card is an act of wire fraud. But as we dig into the timeline, the pattern of her spending abruptly changes. The steady rhythm of dummy invoices and luxury purchases hits a brick wall exactly 3 weeks ago. The skimming stops entirely. The Apex account goes dormant. I stand at the smartboard studying the chronological data. Criminals rarely stop stealing out of sudden moral clarity. They stop because they realize someone is watching. I cross-reference the date the skimming stopped with the internal communications from Vanguard Commercial Realty. I find the catalyst in a company-wide email sent by their chief financial officer. The memo announces an upcoming comprehensive financial review to address regional budget discrepancies. Clara received that email. She realized an audit was imminent. She panicked. She knew the dummy invoices would not hold up under professional scrutiny. She knew Vanguard would trace the vendor payouts to her shell company. She had a 6-figure deficit sitting in the corporate ledger, and she had a matter of weeks to replace the missing capital before the auditors arrived to inspect the books. But you cannot unspend money. You cannot return a vacation. Clara needed cash, and she needed it immediately. On Tuesday morning, Marcus calls me over to his terminal. He looks disturbed. He points to a sudden significant influx of capital into the Apex account. A single wire transfer of $150,000 dated just 10 days ago. The funds did not originate from Vanguard. They came from a high-interest private lending institution. Someone took out an unsecured personal loan at a predatory interest rate and dumped the cash straight into the shell company. Who takes out a loan with a 22% interest rate to cover a corporate deficit, Marcus asks. Someone who is staring down a federal indictment, I reply. I authorize a secondary subpoena for the loan origination documents. We need to know who secured the funds. The documents arrive in our secure portal on Wednesday afternoon. I open the digital file. The glow of the monitor illuminates the quiet conference room. I read the name on the application. I look at the social security number. I verify the residential address and the contact email used to process the background check. The breath leaves my lungs. The applicant is not Clara. The signature on the digital promissory note belongs to Brenda Jenkins, my mother. I zoom in on the metadata attached to the electronic signature. I pull the Internet Protocol address used to finalize the loan agreement. The network address traces back to the condominium where they both live. But the email address used as the primary point of contact is a generic webmail account. I recognize the naming convention. It is the exact format Clara used for her college applications a decade ago. The reality of what I am looking at settles over me like a sheet of ice. Clara did not just take out a loan. She committed identity theft against her own mother. She used Brenda's social security number, Brenda's credit history, and Brenda's name to secure the capital needed to cover up her corporate embezzlement. But the mechanism of the crime is worse than just securing funds. I traced the routing numbers for the loan deposit. Clara did not have the money sent directly to Apex. She had the lending institution deposit the $150,000 into Brenda's personal checking account first. Then she executed a wire transfer from Brenda's account into the shell company. She created a pristine, documented paper trail linking Brenda directly to the fraudulent entity. I sit in my chair staring at the screen. The genius of her cruelty is staggering. Clara knew the audit would eventually uncover the shell company. She knew the authorities would demand an explanation for the stolen funds. She needed a scapegoat, just like she needed a scapegoat 4 years ago at the dining room table. If federal investigators step into this case, they will follow the digital footprints. They will see Brenda's signature on the loan. They will see the money moving from Brenda's personal account into the criminal enterprise. Clara is establishing a narrative where her mother is the mastermind, or at the very least, a willing accomplice in the fraud. Clara is perfectly willing to let a federal judge sentence our mother to prison if it means keeping herself out of a jail cell. I close the file. The silence in the room is heavy. I think about my mother. I think about the woman who threw me out into the snow to protect the golden child. Brenda sacrificed my future to maintain her illusion of a perfect family. And now that same perfect daughter has quietly placed a target on her back. The trap is fully set. But Clara has no idea who holds the key. I sit in Vivian's office and draft the subpoenas. There is a specific, unyielding cadence to legal compulsion. It is not an invitation to chat. It is a mandate backed by the threat of judicial force. I print the documents on heavy bond paper. I authorize the deployment of private process servers. We target 2 addresses. The first is Clara's luxury apartment, though I know she avoids it during business hours to maintain her influencer facade. The second is the condominium. I specifically instruct the server handling the condo to execute the delivery at 10 in the morning. I know my mother's routine. She drinks her second cup of coffee at 10. She watches morning television. She feels secure in her small, curated bubble. Thursday morning, the doorbell rings at the condominium. Brenda opens the door. A man in a plain windbreaker asks to confirm her identity. She nods, expecting a package delivery. He hands her a thick manila envelope, states that she has been served, and walks away down the hallway. Brenda stands in the doorway, a freezing draft rustling the paper in her hands. She opens the envelope on her laminate kitchen counter. The header bears the sharp minimalist logo of Caldwell and Associates. The text below is dense, aggressive legalese. She sees her own name listed as a co-conspirator in an active corporate fraud investigation. She sees the name Vanguard Commercial Realty. She sees a demand for financial records tax returns and a mandatory appearance for a sworn deposition. Brenda cannot process the terminology. She does not own a business. She has never heard of Apex Consulting Solutions. A cold sweat breaks out across her neck. Her heart hammers against her ribs. The safety she thought she secured by downsizing her life shatters in an instant. She reaches for her phone and dials Clara. Clara arrives 20 minutes later. She walks through the door slightly out of breath, carrying a designer handbag purchased with stolen corporate funds. Brenda shoves the documents toward her hands, shaking uncontrollably. Clara reads the subpoena. For a fraction of a second, genuine terror flashes across her face. The firewall she built has been breached. The ghost she thought she buried in the corporate ledgers has found her. But Clara is a creature of survival. She relies entirely on her mother's financial illiteracy. She drops the papers onto the table and lets out a long, exaggerated sigh. She rubs her temples, acting burdened rather than caught. Mom Clara says, her voice thick with manufactured exhaustion. This is a clerical error. Brenda points a trembling finger at the word fraud printed in bold ink. It says you and I are operating a shell company. It says we stole money. Clara sits down next to her, placing a comforting hand on Brenda's shoulder. She spins the narrative with flawless execution. She explains that Vanguard is a ruthless corporate entity currently going through a messy internal audit due to poor management. She claims the accounting department must have crossed their wires, confusing her legitimate independent contractor work with a larger corporate discrepancy. She tells Brenda that predatory auditing firms cast wide nets to justify their exorbitant billing hours. They just want to intimidate us into settling something we did not do. Clara insists, looking her mother directly in the eye. They are bullying us because we do not have a massive corporate legal team. Brenda wants to believe her. Brenda needs to believe her because the alternative destroys her reality. If Clara is lying, then Brenda is harboring a criminal. But the subpoena mandates legal representation. They cannot simply ignore it. They need a lawyer. They call Arthur Gable. Arthur sits in his oak-paneled office and reviews the scanned documents sent over by Brenda. He recognizes the name Caldwell and Associates immediately. He knows Vivian's reputation in the financial sector. He knows her firm does not issue subpoenas based on clerical errors. He warns Brenda that this auditing firm is a predator in the corporate world. He tells her a defense against a firm of this caliber will require a significant retainer to begin discovery. Brenda has a small retirement account left from my father's life insurance payout. It is her final safety net. To cover Arthur's fee, she is forced to liquidate 60% of it. Clara sits next to her while she signs the transfer authorization, nodding in solemn solidarity. Clara allows her mother to drain her future to protect a lie. The deposition is scheduled for the following Tuesday at 9 in the morning. The summons directs them to the 42nd floor of our high-rise in downtown Chicago. Back in my office, I prepare the boardroom. I do not approach this like a standard meeting. I am setting a stage for a structural dismantling. We do not use the standard conference tables. Vivian prefers a specific psychological layout for hostile depositions. I arrange the seating so the deponents must face the floor-to-ceiling windows, forcing them to look out over the sprawling, dizzying grid of the city. The interrogators sit with their backs to the view, backlit and imposing. I place a 3-inch thick binder at the head of the table. The binder contains the dummy invoices, the routing numbers, the metadata from the forged loan, and every luxury receipt Clara generated over the last 6 months. Every page is tabbed and cross-referenced. I brief Marcus and Sarah on the technical displays. I want the digital evidence projected onto the smartboard the exact moment Clara attempts to deny a transaction. I instruct them to remain entirely silent during the proceedings. I want the room to feel cold, clinical, and inescapable. Tuesday morning arrives. The sky over Chicago is a flat, unforgiving gray. The wind howls through the concrete canyons of the financial district. Brenda and Clara ride the commuter train into the city. Arthur meets them in the lobby of our building. He briefs them one last time near the security turnstiles. He tells Clara to keep her answers short. He tells Brenda to speak only when spoken to. He warns them that the auditors upstairs are not looking for the truth. He explains that forensic accountants are looking for inconsistencies to exploit. They step into the elevator. The digital floor indicator climbs higher and higher, the numbers flashing in rapid succession. Clara adjusts the collar of her blazer, assuming the role of the indignant, wronged professional. She practices her look of offended innocence in the mirrored doors. Brenda clings to her purse, her stomach churning with anxiety. She feels small out of her depth, stepping into a world of corporate warfare she does not understand. The elevator chimes. The doors slide open. They step out onto the 42nd floor, greeted by the pristine slate floors and frosted glass partitions of Caldwell and Associates. The environment is intimidating by design. They walk to the reception desk and hand their identification to the security clerk. They are directed to a waiting area featuring leather chairs and modern art. They sit in silence, sipping high-end sparkling water from glass bottles. They have no idea what is waiting behind the heavy glass doors of the primary boardroom. They think they are walking into a sterile legal skirmish with nameless corporate bureaucrats. They think they can charm cry or confuse their way out of the audit, just like they have done with every other problem in their lives. They do not know that the invisible daughter they threw out into the snow is the lead auditor holding the axe. The security clerk guides them down the slate hallway of the 42nd floor. The heavy glass door to the primary boardroom slides open. Arthur leads the way. He has attended hundreds of depositions in his career. He knows the standard geometry of corporate dispute resolution, a neutral table, equal seating. But the moment he steps into this room, he recognizes the architectural hostility. The chairs for the deponents face the floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun reflects off the steel and glass of the surrounding skyscrapers, creating a blinding glare. The chairs for the interrogators sit in the shadow position to keep their faces obscured while illuminating the targets. Brenda takes a seat near the center. She refuses to look out the window. Heights terrify her. Clara sits next to her. She crosses her legs and rests her designer handbag on the table. It is a calculated display of status. She expects the auditor to be a mid-level bureaucrat she can charm or intimidate. Arthur sets his briefcase on the polished mahogany. He leans in and tells them to remember the strategy. Answer only what is asked. Do not volunteer information. The digital clock on the wall ticks forward. 9 o'clock. The glass door opens. I walk in. I am wearing a tailored charcoal suit. My hair is pulled back. My posture is rigid. I carry a 3-inch thick binder. Marcus walks on my left carrying a secondary laptop. A certified court reporter follows us rolling a stenotype machine toward the corner of the room. I do not look at my mother. I do not look at my sister. I look at the empty leather chair at the head of the table. The physical reaction from the opposing side is immediate and visceral. Brenda inhales sharply, the sound tearing through the quiet room. Her hands fly to her mouth. Clara drops her posture. Her jaw falls slack. The polished influencer vanishes, replaced by a terrified woman realizing the floor has just given way. Arthur freezes. His hand hovers over the latch of his briefcase. He recognizes me. The estate lawyer who watched me walk out into the snow 4 years ago is now looking at a senior corporate investigator. His eyes dart from my tailored suit to the heavy binder I place on the table. The legal implications crash over him in real time. He realizes his clients are not facing a random audit. They are facing a structural execution. Brenda stands up. Her chair scrapes loudly against the hardwood floor. The sheer terror that consumed her all morning suddenly evaporates, replaced by a desperate, delusional relief. The mother who banished me on Christmas Day falls right back into her old psychological patterns. She sees her competent, quiet daughter. She sees the person who fixes things. Morgan, Brenda whispers. Her voice is thick with unshed tears. Oh my God, you are here. You work here. You are here to help us. She takes a half step forward, her arms lifting slightly, anticipating a rescue. She expects me to clear the room, tear up the subpoena, and save the family just like I saved the estate. She expects a reunion. I do not blink. I do not smile. I do not acknowledge her outstretched hands. I pull my chair out and sit down. I align the edges of my binder parallel to the edge of the table. I flip the heavy cover open. The first page displays the routing numbers for Apex Consulting Solutions. Marcus sits beside me, opening his laptop. The court reporter rests her hands on the stenotype keys. I look directly into Brenda's eyes. The warmth she is searching for does not exist. Please take your seat, Mrs. Jenkins. The use of her formal surname strikes her like a physical blow. She recoils. Her arms drop to her sides. She slowly lowers herself back into her chair, her gaze darting between Clara and me. I nod to the court reporter. We are on the record, I state. My voice is flat and clinical. I am Morgan Jenkins, lead forensic auditor for Caldwell & Associates. I'm acting on behalf of Vanguard Commercial Realty in the matter of internal asset misappropriation. State your names for the record. The power dynamic shifts permanently. The hierarchy of the Jenkins family shatters on the mahogany table. I am no longer the scapegoat. I am no longer the invisible workhorse. I am the apex authority in the room, backed by corporate mandate and federal law. Arthur recovers his composure. He is a seasoned attorney, but his voice carries a noticeable tremor when he speaks. He attempts to halt the momentum. Ms. Jenkins, Arthur says, leaning forward. This is a severe conflict of interest. You are a direct relative of the deponents. This proceeding is highly irregular. I am formally objecting to your presence as the lead investigator and requesting a neutral mediator. I do not break eye contact with Clara. Clara is staring at the binder in front of me, her skin the color of chalk. Your objection is noted for the record, Mr. Gable, I reply, turning a page. However, Vanguard Commercial Realty and the partners of this firm have been fully briefed on my familial ties. They have signed a waiver of conflict based on the indisputable nature of the digital evidence. The data is immutable. My presence here violates no corporate bylaws. You may choose to terminate this deposition, but doing so will result in an immediate referral to the federal prosecutor for criminal indictment, without the possibility of a civil settlement. The choice is yours. I lay the trap bare. They can sit in the chair and face the fire, or they can walk out the door and face the federal government. Arthur looks at Clara. He looks at the documents spilling out of my binder. He realizes he has no leverage. He sits back in his chair and nods. We will proceed, Arthur says quietly. Clara swallows hard. She grips the arms of her chair. She attempts to deploy her usual defense mechanism. She tries to summon her righteous indignation. This is insane! Clara snaps, her voice shrill. You cannot do this, Morgan. You are just trying to get back at us because Mom kicked you out. You are manufacturing a witch hunt. I ignore the outburst. Emotional bait is a tactic used by people who lack evidence. I turn to the smart board screen mounted on the wall behind them. I press a button on my presentation remote. A document appears on the screen. It is a blown-up image of a vendor invoice billed to Vanguard Commercial Realty for $4,200. The service rendered is listed as seasonal landscaping for an industrial park in Naperville. Miss Jenkins, I say, directing my attention solely to Clara. Do you recognize this invoice? Clara glares at me. Of course I do. I processed it. I do accounts payable. I press the button again. A second document appears side by side with the invoice. It is a municipal demolition record. Can you explain to this room how a vendor performed seasonal landscaping on an industrial park that was demolished and paved over by the city 2 years prior to the billing date? Clara opens her mouth, but the lie dies in her throat. I do not give her time to invent a clerical error. I press the button a third time. The screen shifts. It displays the bank routing numbers for the payment connecting the Vanguard disbursement directly to the commercial checking account of Apex Consulting Solutions. Can you also explain, I continue, the cadence of my voice steady and unyielding, why the funds for this phantom landscaping were routed directly into an entity where you are listed as the sole registered agent? Clara stares at the screen. The labyrinth of her deceit is laid out in sharp, high-definition logic. She looks at Arthur, searching for a legal lifeline. Arthur looks down at his legal pad. He has nothing to offer. Brenda looks at the screen. She reads the name Apex Consulting Solutions. She remembers the word fraud from the subpoena. She looks at her golden child, the daughter who could do no wrong. Brenda whispers the reality, beginning to pierce her denial. What is that? What is Apex? Clara snaps her attention to Brenda. It is a mistake, Mom. She is twisting the numbers. She is doing this to ruin me. I turn the page in my binder. The sound of the thick paper turning echoes in the quiet room. The financial devastation is only the beginning. The real destruction is waiting on the next page. I turn the page in my binder. The sound of the heavy paper shifting cuts through the dead air of the boardroom. Clara watches my hand. She sees the methodical precision of the movement, and she realizes the trap has closed. Her instinct is to fight her way out the only way she knows how. She defaults to theater. This is a witch hunt, Clara yells. Her voice shatters the quiet, bouncing sharply off the glass walls. She pushes her chair back and stands up, trying to physically dominate the space. You are just doing this because you have always been jealous of me. You are manufacturing this entire audit to get back at Mom for kicking you out. She points a trembling finger across the table. Her breathing is erratic. She is waiting for the reaction. She is waiting for me to raise my voice, to defend myself, to engage in the familiar toxic ping-pong we played for decades in the suburbs. I do not react. I do not defend my motives. I look at the court reporter sitting in the corner. Let the record reflect the deponent is raising her voice, and standing I state. Clara falters. The acoustics of the corporate boardroom do not support a tantrum. There is no enabling mother rushing to comfort her. There is only the steady rhythmic clicking of the stenotype machine recording her every word. She crosses her arms, trying to project defiance. Vanguard knew about Apex. Clara insists, her tone shifting from rage to aggressive defense. It was an approved vendor management system. I was authorized to subcontract the maintenance accounts to consolidate the billing. You do not understand their corporate structure. I press a button on my presentation remote. The smartboard illuminates. An email exchange appears in crisp, high-definition text. It is a communication between my firm and the Chief Financial Officer of Vanguard Commercial Realty. I highlight a specific paragraph. This is a sworn affidavit from the executive board, I say, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. They explicitly deny any knowledge of an entity named Apex Consulting Solutions. They confirm you possessed no authorization to subcontract vendor accounts, Clara stammers. Her eyes dart across the screen. They are lying, she says, her voice rising again. The executive board is trying to cover up their own gross incompetence. I submitted the incorporation documents directly to Human Resources during my onboarding. I press the remote a second time. The email exchange vanishes. A dense spreadsheet of alphanumeric codes replaces it. These are the Internet Protocol logs from the Vanguard secure servers, I explain. I point to a specific row highlighted in blue. This log indicates that the Apex vendor profile was created internally using your specific employee login credentials. The profile was established at 11 in the evening on a Tuesday, well outside of your standard operating hours. Furthermore, the digital footprint includes the exact media access control address of your personal laptop. You did not submit documents to Human Resources. You bypassed the security protocols and embedded the shell company yourself. Clara slowly lowers herself back into her chair. The defiance drains out of her. The reality of the digital age is crashing down on her. She cannot gaslight a server log. She cannot manipulate a metadata tag. She changes her approach, pivoting seamlessly from the victim of a witch hunt to the victim of a toxic workplace. The tears begin to fall. They are real tears born from genuine panic. She covers her face with her hands, letting her shoulders shake. I was overwhelmed, Clara sobs, looking at Arthur. The corporate environment was incredibly demanding. They gave me no training. I made a clerical mistake while trying to balance the accounts at the end of the quarter. The software is confusing. It was just an accounting error. A clerical error, I repeat. I nod to Marcus. He types a command into his terminal. The smartboard divides into 4 distinct quadrants. Let us review the exact nature of these clerical errors. In Quadrant 1, a receipt from a luxury auto dealership appears. It shows a significant down payment for a high-end sport utility vehicle. In Quadrant 2, a transaction log from a commercial airline displays the purchase of 2 first-class tickets to a coastal resort in Mexico. In Quadrant 3, a detailed invoice from a designer boutique on Oak Street lists a leather handbag and 2 silk scarves. In Quadrant 4, the Apex Consulting Solutions ledger displays the exact matching outbound transfers funding every single one of these purchases. Can you articulate for the record, I ask, how a first-class flight to Cabo San Lucas serves as a legitimate vendor payout for a commercial real estate firm? Clara stares at the screen. The evidence is a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Her curated internet persona, the successful, independent lifestyle she broadcasted to the world, is publicly dismantled into a series of petty thefts. She looks at Arthur silently, begging for a legal lifeline. Arthur Gable is a highly experienced defense attorney, but he is also a pragmatist. He reviews the printed copies in front of him. He looks at the timestamp metadata. He knows a bulletproof digital chain of custody when he sees one. He takes off his reading glasses. He rubs the bridge of his nose. He rests his forehead in his hand. He does not offer an objection. He abandons the defense. Arthur, do something, Clara hisses, panic making her voice brittle. Stop talking, Clara, Arthur replies quietly, not looking up. Just stop talking. But Clara cannot stop. Her entire identity requires external validation. If she accepts the facts projected on the screen, she accepts that she is a criminal. She turns to the only person left in the room who has ever bought her lies. She turns to our mother. "Mom, tell her to stop." Clara pleads, grabbing Brenda's forearm. "She is doing this to punish us. She is twisting the data to make me look guilty." Brenda looks at Clara and then looks at the screen. Brenda cannot read an internet protocol address, but she knows what a designer handbag costs. She recognizes the exact dates of the Mexico trip. Clara told her Vanguard paid for that vacation as a performance bonus. The cognitive dissonance is paralyzing. I do not allow Brenda the time to intervene. I maintain the relentless tempo of the interrogation. "You use stolen corporate funds to finance a fictitious lifestyle," I state. "You generated 42 separate fraudulent invoices over a period of 6 months. You authorized the payouts yourself. You routed the capital into a shell company you controlled. You committed federal wire fraud 42 consecutive times." Clara's breathing becomes ragged. The tears flowing down her cheeks are no longer a performance. They are the physiological response of an ego undergoing catastrophic failure. The persona she has worn her entire life disintegrates on the mahogany table. Her designer clothes suddenly look like a cheap costume. She looks around the room. The stenographer continues to type, her face devoid of any emotion. Marcus is reviewing the next data set completely unfazed. I am looking at her with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. There is no empathy to harvest here. Mathematics does not care about her feelings. Metadata does not respond to manipulation. "I was going to pay it back," Clara whispers. Her voice is stripped of all its usual arrogance. It is a small, pathetic sound. "I just needed a bridge. I was going to replace every cent before the end of the year." "You cannot bridge a stolen asset," I reply. "But it is interesting that you mention replacing the capital, because our audit revealed a sudden and dramatic shift in your methodology." I close the section of the binder containing the luxury receipts. I open the final, thickest section. 3 weeks ago, the chief financial officer of Vanguard announced a regional budget review, I say. The skimming from the accounts payable department stopped that exact same day. The Apex account went completely dormant. You realized the auditors were coming. You realized you had a massive deficit sitting in the corporate ledger. Clara stops crying. The blood drains from her face entirely. She looks like she might faint. She knows exactly what is waiting on the next page. "You panicked," I continue, keeping my tone perfectly level. "You needed cash immediately to balance the Vanguard accounts before the review. But you had already spent the stolen capital. You could not secure a traditional corporate loan because your shell company had no legitimate revenue history. You needed a private lender, and you needed a fall guy." Arthur lifts his head. His legal instincts kick back in. He senses the pivot from simple corporate embezzlement to something far more sinister. "Ms. Jenkins, where are you going with this line of questioning?" I do not look at Arthur. I keep my eyes locked on Clara. "I am establishing the origin of the $150,000 deposit made into the Apex Consulting account 10 days ago," I say. "A deposit explicitly designed to obscure the corporate theft." Clara shakes her head. The movement is tiny, almost imperceptible. It is a silent, desperate plea. She is begging me not to turn the page. She is begging me not to show the rest of the room what she did to save herself. I ignore the plea. I press the button on the presentation remote. The screen clears the luxury receipts. A new document materializes in high definition. It is a digital promissory note from a high-interest private lending institution, and the signature at the bottom of the page does not belong to Clara. The digital promissory note glows on the smartboard. The resolution is sharp enough to reveal the slight pixelation around the electronic signature. The name on the dotted line reads Brenda Jenkins. Brenda stares at the screen. She squints, leaning forward in her leather chair, trying to make sense of the letters. She recognizes the shape of the signature. It is an exact replica of the way she signs her checks, complete with the slight flourish on the capital letters. She looks at the date printed in the top right corner. 10 days ago. She shakes her head. The confusion on her face is genuine. She looks at Arthur Gable, then across the table at me. "I did not sign that," Brenda says. Her voice is fragile, trembling with the effort to understand a language she does not speak. I have not applied for a loan since we lost the house. I do not even have the credit score for a car lease. Arthur stares at the screen. His legal mind processes the data much faster than his client. He looks at the interest rate. He looks at the origination fee. Then he looks at Clara. He sees Clara gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the floor. Arthur realizes he is not just defending a case of corporate embezzlement. He is sitting next to a woman who committed identity theft against her own mother. Brenda misinterprets the silence in the room. She looks at my tailored suit, the junior associates flanking me, and the heavy binder resting on the table. She views this entire proceeding through the narrow narcissistic lens she has used her entire life. She assumes this deposition is an elaborate stage I built to extract an apology. She thinks I am using my corporate authority to punish her for a domestic dispute. The dam finally breaks. Brenda begins to cry. "Morgan, please." Brenda sobs, her voice echoing in the sterile boardroom. "I am sorry. Is that what you want to hear? I am so sorry for what I did to you on Christmas." She reaches across the wide mahogany table, her hands open, pleading. "We lost everything after you left?" Brenda continues, the tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "We lost the house. We lost our friends. I was wrong to kick you out. I was angry, and I was grieving your father, and I made a terrible mistake. But you do not have to do this. You do not have to drag us into a skyscraper and humiliate your sister over a misunderstanding. Please, Morgan, just come home. We can be a family again." The pathetic nature of her apology hangs in the cold air. She is offering me a seat at a table that no longer exists, trying to trade empty maternal guilt for a corporate pardon. She expects the invisible daughter to fold, to lower her head, and to sweep the mess under the rug. I do not move. I do not soften my gaze. "You are not here because of Christmas, Brenda," I say. I reach into the final section of my binder. I pull out a stack of printed documents, held together by a heavy binder clip. I slide the stack across the polished wood. The papers glide smoothly, coming to a stop directly in front of her folded hands. "You are here because of this," I state. Brenda looks down at the stack. Her tears spot the top page. I signal Marcus. The smartboard transitions from the promissory note to a detailed flowchart. "Read the documents, Mrs. Jenkins," I instruct. "I will walk you through the architecture of your current legal exposure." 10 days ago, an unsecured personal loan for $150,000 was approved by a predatory private lender. The application was submitted using your full name, your date of birth, and your social security number. Brenda touches the paper. She traces her own printed name. "But I did not authorize this," she whispers. "I know you did not," I reply. "Look at the Internet Protocol address attached to the digital signature. It traces back to the wireless router in your current condominium. Now look at the secondary contact email provided to the lender." Brenda flips to the second page. She reads the email address. She recognizes it immediately. It is the same email address Clara has used since high school. Clara knew the audit was coming. I explain, keeping my tone entirely factual. She knew Vanguard would demand an accounting of the missing funds. She needed capital to balance the corporate ledger, and she needed it fast. So she stole your identity. She forged your signature to secure the cash. Arthur closes his eyes. He rubs his temples. He knows the prosecution will feast on this evidence. But stealing your identity was merely a logistical step. I continue, turning my attention back to the flowchart on the screen. The true severity of the crime is the routing structure she utilized. Clara did not have the private lender deposit the $150,000 directly into her shell company. That would have linked her directly to the sudden influx of cash. I press the presentation remote. A red arrow appears on the screen, connecting the private lender to a familiar set of banking numbers. She had the lender deposit the funds into your personal checking account, Brenda. Brenda gasps, her hand flying to her chest. She flips to the third page in the stack. It is a certified copy of her own monthly bank statement. There it is, printed in stark black ink. A massive deposit from a commercial lending institution followed 24 hours later by an outbound wire transfer of the exact same amount. Clara logged into your personal banking portal, I say, my voice cutting through the silence. She waited for the loan to clear, and then she executed a wire transfer from your checking account directly into the commercial account of Apex Consulting Solutions. She used your bank account to launder the money. Brenda stares at her bank statement. Her breathing becomes shallow and erratic. If federal investigators subpoena these records, I tell her they will not see Clara hiding behind a keyboard. They will see a pristine documented paper trail. They will see your signature on a fraudulent loan application. They will see your checking account receiving the illicit funds. They will see you financing a shell company used to embezzle corporate assets. Clara built a scaffold and she placed you directly on the trapdoor. Brenda is paralyzed. The structural failure of her reality is absolute. Everything she believed about her world, her status, and her family shatters in this sterile room. I press the remote one final time. And if the authorities had any doubts about your involvement, I say Clara provided them with written confirmation. The smartboard displays a drafted email. Look at page 4, I instruct. Brenda turns the page with a shaking hand. It is a communication sent from Clara's burner account to the private lender responding to a routine inquiry about the loan purpose. Clara wrote that email posing as you, Brenda. Read what your daughter typed to the bank. Brenda reads the text out loud, her voice cracking over the words. My daughter Clara is simply an independent contractor. I manage all the primary financial decisions for our consulting firm. The liability rests entirely with me. The silence in the boardroom is deafening. The only sound is the rhythmic, mechanical clicking of the court reporter documenting the destruction of a family. Brenda slowly turns her head. She looks at Clara. Clara sits frozen in her leather chair. The golden child, the perfect daughter, the woman who could do no wrong. Clara does not offer a defense. She does not try to spin a new narrative. She cannot even meet her mother's eyes. She stares fixedly at the mahogany table, her jaw clenched, waiting for the impact. Brenda realizes the terrifying truth. Clara did not just make a mistake. Clara actively, meticulously framed her own mother for a federal crime. Clara was willing to let Brenda go to a federal penitentiary for wire fraud just to keep herself out of a jail cell. All those years in the suburbs, Brenda sacrificed everything to protect Clara. She demanded my obedience. She drained my savings. She threw me out into the freezing snow on Christmas Day, erasing me from the family tree just to spare Clara the minor embarrassment of a failing boutique. Brenda chose her favorite daughter, and her favorite daughter chose to hand her a prison sentence. A visceral, hollow sobbing erupts from Brenda's chest. It is an ugly, agonizing sound. It is the sound of a woman mourning the illusion she wasted her entire life protecting. She drops her face into her hands, her shoulders heaving with the weight of the betrayal. She cries for the house she lost. She cries for the safety she surrendered. But mostly she cries because she finally understands what she threw away, and she sees the true nature of what she chose to keep. I sit at the head of the table, my hands folded over the binder. I watch the woman who birthed me break down under the weight of her own choices. I feel no triumph. I feel no joy. I just feel the cold, undeniable satisfaction of a balanced ledger. The audit is complete. The truth is exposed. Now it is time to dictate the terms of their surrender. The sound of Brenda's sobbing fills the sterile environment of the corporate boardroom. It is the raw, unedited soundtrack of a crumbling matriarchy. Arthur Gable sits perfectly still. He does not offer a tissue. He does not offer legal counsel. He recognizes that this proceeding has bypassed the realm of civil dispute and entered the territory of federal criminal exposure. Clara stares at the mahogany table. The influencer facade is entirely stripped away. She is reduced to a hollow, terrified shell. The realization that she has cornered herself using her own mother as the final barricade is suffocating her. I allow the silence to stretch. I let them sit in the wreckage of their own making. I wait until Brenda's sobbing subsides into ragged, shallow breathing. When the room is quiet enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning, I speak. Vanguard Commercial Realty retained Caldwell and Associates to perform a comprehensive forensic audit. I state, my voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. Our mandate was to identify the source of the internal hemorrhaging and build an evidentiary file capable of securing a federal indictment. I place my hand flat on the thick binder resting in front of me. This file is complete. The digital chain of custody is secure. The metadata is verified. The Internet Protocol logs are authenticated. If I hand this binder to the state prosecutor, the district attorney will immediately impanel a grand jury. I turn my gaze to Clara. You will be indicted for 42 counts of wire fraud, I tell her. You will be indicted for identity theft. You will be indicted for bank fraud. The mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines for this combination of financial crimes, given the dollar amount involved, guarantee a multi-year federal prison term. Clara flinches as if physically struck. The word prison hangs in the air, a terrifying, inescapable reality. She looks at Arthur, her eyes wide with desperation. Arthur, she pleads, her voice a fragile whisper. Tell her she cannot do this. Tell her we can settle. Arthur looks at her with a profound, weary disgust. He shakes his head slowly. She can do this, Clara. She has the receipts. You forged loan documents in your mother's name. I cannot negotiate a settlement for identity theft. I shift my attention back to the center of the table. Because my firm acts as the primary investigative agent for Vanguard, we possess a unique degree of leverage regarding the disposition of this case, I explain. The executive board is primarily concerned with restitution. They want their capital returned, and they want the liability neutralized. They do not necessarily want the negative public relations associated with a protracted criminal trial involving their own accounts payable department. I pause, ensuring every word lands with absolute clarity. Therefore, Vanguard has authorized me to present you with two options. The tension in the room spikes. Brenda lifts her head. Her mascara smeared her eyes red and swollen. Clara leans forward, a desperate, frantic hope flickering in her gaze. She thinks there is a loophole. She thinks there is a way out that preserves her status. Option A. I continue, my tone uncompromising. I close this binder, walk out of this room, and courier the entire file directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the State Prosecutor's Office. The authorities will freeze your accounts by sunset. You will be arrested before the end of the week. Your mother will be named as a co-conspirator until she can prove she did not sign the promissory note. The trial will be public, and the conviction is a statistical certainty. Clara's hope evaporates instantly. She grips the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. No, she gasps. No, please. I hold up a single finger, silencing her. Option B requires absolute compliance, I state. It requires the total systemic dismantling of your current reality. I nod to Marcus. He opens a manila folder resting beside his laptop. He slides 3 documents across the polished mahogany. They come to a halt in front of Clara and Brenda. If you choose option B, I explain. Clara will immediately sign over the title to her leased luxury vehicle. She will liquidate the entirety of her personal savings, investments, and retirement accounts. Every cent will be transferred to a Vanguard restitution escrow. Clara stares at the documents. Her mouth falls open. But that is everything I have, she whispers. I will have nothing. You will have your freedom, I reply coldly. But the financial restitution is only the first condition. I point to the second document in the stack. You will also sign a legally binding consent decree, I continue. This decree permanently dissolves Apex Consulting Solutions. Furthermore, it stipulates that you accept a lifetime ban from holding any fiduciary position, financial management role, or accounting responsibility within the United States. You will never manage another corporate account. You will never authorize another vendor payout. Clara looks at the paper. The consent decree is not just a financial penalty. It is a professional execution. It guarantees that the influencer lifestyle she relies on for validation is permanently over. She will be relegated to entry-level work for the rest of her life. The public persona she curated so carefully will be exposed as a complete fraud. And the final condition, I say, turning my gaze to Brenda. Brenda flinches, shrinking back into her chair. You must sign a sworn affidavit, I instruct her, pointing to the third document. The affidavit acknowledges that you possess direct knowledge of Clara's fraudulent activities. It explicitly states that Clara forged your signature on the private loan application without your consent, and that she utilized your personal banking portal to launder the stolen funds. Brenda looks at the affidavit. Her hands tremble. She understands the psychological weight of the document. Signing it means legally recognizing that her golden child is a criminal. It means accepting that Clara betrayed her. It destroys the illusion of the perfect family forever. Arthur leans forward, picking up the documents. He reviews the terms, his eyes scanning the aggressive legal language. He knows a checkmate when he sees one. He sets the papers down and turns to Clara. "Sign them," Arthur says. His voice is devoid of any professional warmth. It is a harsh, pragmatic command. Clara looks at him horrified. "Arthur, I cannot. If I sign the ban, my career is over. I will be ruined." Arthur leans closer to her, lowering his voice, though the words are perfectly audible in the quiet room. "Your career is already over, Clara. Your choice right now is whether you spend the next 10 years working a minimum wage job or whether you spend them in a federal penitentiary wearing an orange jumpsuit. Sign the papers." Clara looks at the documents. The reality of her situation finally crushes the last remnants of her arrogance. There is no audience to manipulate. There is no enabling mother to hide behind. She picks up the luxury pen resting beside her designer handbag. Her hand shakes violently. She presses the nib to the paper. She signs the asset forfeiture. She signs the consent decree. The tears fall steadily, dropping onto the legal bond paper, smudging the ink. It is the physical manifestation of a golden child facing their first genuine consequence. I watch her sign her own ruin. I feel no pity. I feel the exact same cold detachment I felt when I discovered the dummy invoices. I look at Brenda. Brenda picks up the pen. She does not hesitate. She signs the affidavit acknowledging Clara's fraud. She signs away the illusion she protected for 30 years. Marcus collects the signed documents. He checks the signatures, nods to me, and places them in the manila folder. The deposition is concluded, I state. I stand up. I close the thick binder. The sharp snap of the metal rings echoes in the room. I hand the binder to Marcus. I button my suit jacket. I do not offer a closing pleasantry. I do not offer advice. I turn to walk out of the boardroom. Morgan, wait. The voice is desperate, ragged, and raw. I stop. I turn around. Brenda is standing up. She steps around the mahogany table, moving toward me. Her face is a portrait of profound, agonizing regret. She reaches out her hand, trembling, desperate for physical contact. "Please," Brenda begs, the tears streaming down her face. "Please do not walk out that door." She reaches for my hand. She wants to bridge the 4-year gap. She wants to erase the Christmas dinner. She wants to pretend that the last hour did not happen, that the last 4 years did not happen. "I am so sorry," Morgan. Brenda sobs, her fingers inches from my wrist. "I see it now. I see what she did. I see what I did to you. Please give me another chance. Let me be your mother again. We can fix this. We can be a family." Her plea hangs in the air, heavy with desperate, terrifying need. She is a woman standing in the ashes of a burned-down house, begging me to help her rebuild. She expects me to absorb the trauma, to forgive the betrayal, and to anchor her reality once more. But I am not the invisible daughter anymore. And the boundaries I built over the last 4 years are forged from steel. Brenda's fingers hover just inches from my wrist. Her hand is shaking, the skin pale and lined with age. She is looking up at me with an expression of total, shattering desperation. She wants me to close the gap. She wants me to reach out, take her hand, and anchor her in the storm she just realized she is standing in. She wants the daughter she exiled to absorb the shockwave of Clara's betrayal. I do not close the gap. I gently but very firmly pull my arm back. The physical movement is small, perhaps only 2 or 3 inches. But in the quiet geometry of the boardroom, it is a canyon opening between us. Brenda drops her hand. The rejection lands heavily on her shoulders, and she seems to shrink into the expensive leather chair. She looks smaller than she ever did in the suburbs. The illusion of her authority is gone, stripped away by the reality of the documents resting on the table. "Morgan, please," she whispers, the tears tracking through her ruined makeup. "We are blood. We are all each other has left." "We share genetics," Brenda, I reply, keeping my voice remarkably steady. "That is a biological fact. It is not a contract for lifelong servitude." I look down at the woman who birthed me. I do not feel the familiar suffocating pressure in my chest. For 28 years, my nervous system was wired to respond directly to her anxiety. If Brenda was upset, my body instinctively prepared to fix the problem. I was trained from childhood to be the emotional shock absorber for this family. When Clara threw a tantrum over a broken toy, I was expected to surrender mine. When my father left us drowning in debt, I was expected to surrender my savings. The conditioning was deeply ingrained. But the conditioning is broken now. I look at her crying, and my pulse does not elevate. I just see a woman grieving the consequences of her own terrible calculations. "You want me to forgive you?" I state, breaking the heavy silence. "You want me to tell you that the Christmas dinner does not matter anymore? You want me to say that 4 years of absolute silence, 4 years of letting me believe I was entirely disposable, is erased because you are suddenly hurting and scared? You are searching for a time machine, not a relationship." Brenda nods eagerly, clinging to the word forgive like a life raft. "Yes. Yes, Morgan. We can start over. I will do better. We can fix this." I pick up my presentation remote from the table and slip it into my pocket. The motion is calm, deliberate. "I do forgive you," I tell her. Both Brenda and Clara look up. A tiny, fragile spark of hope ignites in Brenda's swollen eyes. She thinks she has won the negotiation. She thinks the invisible daughter is finally yielding to the gravitational pull of the matriarch. She assumes the familiar dynamic is snapping back into place. "I forgive you," I repeat, because holding on to the anger is an inefficient use of my time. Anger is a debt that compounds daily. It costs emotional capital I prefer to spend on my career, my marriage, and my actual life. "I spent the first year after you threw me out burning with rage. It kept me warm in a freezing basement apartment, but it was toxic. I learned that true freedom requires dropping the resentment. I am not angry at you anymore, Brenda. I am not plotting against you. I do not wish you harm." I step away from the mahogany table, putting physical distance between myself and the wreckage of their lives. But forgiveness does not mean access. The spark in Brenda's eyes extinguishes instantly. The desperation returns thicker and more frantic than before. "You are confusing absolution with a return to the status quo," I explain, speaking with the measured cadence of a judge delivering a final ruling. "You think apologizing rewrites history? It does not. An apology acknowledges a breach of contract. It does not mean the contract is automatically renewed." "But I am your mother," Brenda insists, her voice fracturing under the weight of my logic. "You cannot just cut me out forever. You cannot turn your back on your own mother." "You cut me out," I remind her. My tone is devoid of malice but stripped of all warmth. "You threw me out into a freezing winter night because I threatened your preferred narrative. You built an ecosystem in our home where love was strictly conditional on my obedience and my utility. As long as I paid the bills, managed the forbearance agreement, and kept Clara shielded from her own failures, I was allowed to sit quietly in the background. The moment I became inconvenient, the moment I spoke an uncomfortable truth, you discarded me. I refuse to return to an ecosystem where my value is determined by my willingness to be abused." I turn my attention to Clara. She is staring blankly at the signed consent decree sitting in the manila folder. Her designer handbag rests next to her elbow, a useless prop from a play that has just been permanently canceled. Clara spent her entire life stepping on my neck to elevate herself. She engineered my exile to hide her boutique's bankruptcy. She stole corporate funds from her employer. She forged documents to frame her own mother. She did it all under the assumption that the rules of consequence did not apply to her. Now the silence from Clara is deafening. She has always been the loudest person in any room, dominating conversations, demanding attention, spinning narratives to suit her needs. Today she has no words. The mathematical certainty of her crimes has silenced her. I look at her, and I realize she is the poorest person I have ever met. She has no technical skills, no authentic relationships, and now a lifetime ban from the financial sector. You have 30 days to surrender the vehicle and liquidate the accounts, I tell Clara. Marcus will monitor the escrow transfers closely. If you attempt to hide assets, transfer funds to unlisted accounts, or if you violate any terms of the consent decree, the waiver of prosecution is immediately nullified. Vanguard will notify the federal authorities the very next morning. Clara does not argue. She does not nod. She simply stares at the table, trapped in the crushing reality of a life she can no longer manipulate. Her golden child armor is shattered beyond repair. I button my suit jacket, adjusting the lapels. I nod to Marcus. He closes his secondary laptop, picks up the thick manila folder containing their signed ruin, and walks toward the door. The certified court reporter finishes packing the stenotype machine, sliding it into her carrying case, and follows him out into the hallway. I am the last one left standing in the room with them. Brenda looks around the empty space. She realizes this is the absolute end. There are no more documents to sign. There are no more legal negotiations. The audit is closed. Morgan. What am I supposed to do now? Brenda asks. Her voice echoes in the glass-walled room. It is the plea of a woman who has never solved her own problems, asking the daughter she threw away for one final set of instructions. You figure it out, I say, just like I did. I turn my back on them. I walk to the heavy glass door. I do not hesitate, and I do not look over my shoulder. I push the door open and step out into the pristine slate hallway of Caldwell & Associates. The heavy door swings shut behind me, the hydraulic hinge hissing quietly until the latch clicks into place. The sound is final. It seals them inside the conference room, locking them in the precise, devastating outcome they engineered for themselves. I walk down the corridor toward the elevators. My footsteps are steady, the sound sharp and rhythmic against the stone floor. I press the call button. The digital chime sounds, and the brushed steel doors slide open. I step inside the empty cab and press the button for the lobby. The descent takes 30 seconds. As the digital floor numbers drop rapidly, I feel a strange, profound physical sensation taking over my body. For 28 years, I carried an invisible, suffocating weight. It was the weight of managing Brenda's constant anxiety. It was the weight of covering Clara's chronic incompetence. It was the crushing responsibility of keeping a dying estate afloat while being treated like a ghost in my own home. The elevator reaches the ground floor. The doors open to the bustling marble lobby of the financial tower. I walk past the security turnstiles, acknowledging the guard with a nod, and push through the revolving glass doors. I step out onto the streets of downtown Chicago. The midday sun is bright, cutting through the geometric shadows of the surrounding skyscrapers. The wind off Lake Michigan is sharp, bracing, and intensely cold. The city is loud, moving at a frantic, relentless pace. Taxis honk in the distance. Pedestrians rush past on the wide concrete sidewalks, bundled in heavy coats. I stand there for a moment, letting the freezing air hit my face. My shoulders drop. It is a profound, involuntary release of deep muscular tension. The tightness in my jaw, a permanent fixture since my early childhood, simply melts away. I take a deep, slow breath, filling my lungs with the chaotic, vibrant energy of the city. The weight of a lifetime of scapegoating is finally gone. I am not carrying them anymore. I am not responsible for their debts, their lies, their criminal exposure, or their survival. The ledger is perfectly balanced. I am just Morgan Jenkins. I am a senior partner at a premier forensic accounting firm. I am a wife. I am free. I pull my phone from my pocket and open a message to Julian. The audit is closed, I type. I am coming home. He replies 30 seconds later. I am proud of you. Dinner is on me tonight. I smile, slide the phone back into my pocket, and blend into the river of people walking down the avenue. The story of my family is officially over. But there is one final chapter to this narrative, a brief glimpse into what happens when you stop watering dead plants and start building your own garden. 5 years is a long ledger to balance. It is an eternity when you are paying off a moral debt. It has been 60 months since the heavy glass door of the Caldwell and Associates boardroom swung shut, sealing my mother and sister inside the ruins of their own calculations. Time is the ultimate auditor. It strips away the performance and leaves only the raw equity of your choices. Let us look at the suburbs one last time. Clara is 36 years old. She works at a premium retail outlet in a high-end shopping district. She wears a mandatory black uniform. She spends 8 hours a day standing on her feet, folding cashmere sweaters, and scanning barcodes for women who live the life she used to fake. The consent decree she signed is an invisible permanent cage. Every time she applies for a corporate position, the background check flags her lifetime ban from fiduciary roles. Human resources departments see the restriction and immediately toss her resume into the shredder. She is serving a life sentence in the service sector. The irony is a daily bitter pill. Clara stands behind a cash register ringing up designer handbags for wealthy customers, knowing she will never own one again. Her social media accounts are deleted. The audience she craved is gone. She has no influence. She is just an employee on a 15-minute break, sitting in a fluorescent-lit back room checking her balance on a cracked phone screen to see if she can afford a premium coffee before her shift ends. 30 miles away, Brenda sits in her 2-bedroom condominium. The walls are still thin. The carpet still smells faint and stale. She is in her late 60s now. Her social circle from the country club days dissolved years ago. Wealthy friends do not visit cramped condos. They do not invite women whose daughters were implicated in corporate scandals to their charity galas. Brenda spends her days watching daytime television and staring out the window at the parking lot. Clara lives with her because Clara cannot afford rent on a retail wage. They share a small space filled with an oppressive, unspoken resentment. Clara blames Brenda for not having the money to save them. Brenda looks at Clara and sees the architect of their ruin. When Clara comes home from work, she complains about her manager. She complains about her aching feet. She blames the economy. She never blames herself. Brenda sits in her armchair and listens to the endless complaints. She realizes now that her golden child is not a victim of circumstance. Clara is a parasite, and Brenda invited the parasite to stay. Brenda remembers the Christmas dinner. She remembers the way I quietly put on my coat and walked out into the snow. She traded a daughter who managed crises for a daughter who manufactures them. Brenda has no retirement account left. She relies on Social Security and Clara's hourly wages. They are chained together in a small square of low-income housing, drowning in mutual regret. Brenda waits for the phone to ring, hoping for a voice from her past to break the silence. The phone never rings. My Saturday afternoon looks very different. I am 37 years old. I made senior partner at the firm 2 years ago. Vivian and I bought out a retiring founder, and my name is now etched permanently into the marble wall behind the reception desk downtown. But the real victory is not the corner office. The real victory is happening right now in my backyard. I am standing on the cedar deck of my home in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. The sun is setting, casting a warm, golden light across the manicured lawn. The basement apartment in Albany Park feels like a lifetime ago. The air tonight smells like grilled cedar planks and fresh basil. Julian is standing near the outdoor kitchen. He flips a steak on the grill, says something to Marcus, and they both laugh. The sound of my husband laughing is my favorite sound in the world. Vivian sits at the long wooden patio table. She wears a casual linen dress. The Iron Maiden is relaxed. She is holding a glass of Pinot Noir, debating tax theory with Julian's sister. Marcus is here with his new fiancée. Sarah is here. A dozen other friends fill the yard. The noise is incredible. It is the sound of genuine connection. It is the sound of people who show up because they value you, not because they need you to underwrite their failures. I look at the long wooden table on my patio. It is covered with platters of food, empty wine bottles, and the elbows of people leaning in to hear a story. It is a stark contrast to the formal dining room table in the suburbs. That table was a stage for manipulation. This table is an anchor for authenticity. I did not inherit this family. I engineered it. I chose people who operate on merit, honesty, and mutual respect. We do not demand blind loyalty. We demand accountability. Standing here holding a glass of sparkling water, I realize the true nature of victory. Society tells you that revenge is a fiery confrontation. You are supposed to march back into the enemy camp and demand an apology. You are supposed to force them to acknowledge your worth. But that is just another form of begging. True revenge is silent. True revenge is building a reality so undeniably magnificent that the people who tried to break you shrink into irrelevance. They become footnotes in a much larger, brighter narrative. I do not hate Brenda and Clara. I simply do not think about them at all. I want to step out of this story for a moment and speak directly to you. If you are listening to this and you are sitting at a table where your worth is constantly questioned, I need you to hear me. If you are the invisible shock absorber for a family that praises the loudest, most toxic sibling, you have to stop. Stop waiting for them to validate you. They are incapable of seeing your value because your competence highlights their failure. Stop watering dead plants. Put on your coat. Walk out into the cold. It will be terrifying at first. You will sleep on air mattresses and eat cheap food. But every brick you lay will belong to you. Build your own table. Curate your own guest list. Invite only those who bring value to the space. The world is wide and there are people out there who will value your brilliant, capable mind. You just have to be brave enough to leave the room where you are unappreciated. Now we have reached the end of the ledger, and I want to hear your final verdict. When I sat in that high-rise boardroom, holding the forged loan documents and the metadata receipts, I held Clara's freedom in my hands. I gave them the second option. I took their assets and banished Clara from the financial sector, but I kept them out of federal prison. If you were sitting in my chair, looking across the table at the mother who threw you away, and the sister who tried to frame her, what would you have done? Would you have offered the restitution deal to close the book cleanly? Or would you have handed that 3-inch binder straight to the district attorney and pressed full federal charges? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Type offered the deal or type pressed charges. I will be reading every single response to see how many of you would have let the hammer fall. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves and remember to build your own table.